Let them praises give Jehovah. They were made at his command. Them forever he established. His decree shall ever stand. From the earth, oh, praise Jehovah. All ye floods, ye dragons all. Fire and hail and snow and vapor, stormy winds that hear him call. Let them praises give Jehovah, for his name alone is high. And his glory is exalted. And his glory is exalted. And his glory is exalted, far above the earth and sky.
As said before, I'm Daniel Crouch. Here's just some handouts to pass around. And I am Jimmy's youngest son, which means I am the favorite, but also the most immature, I'm sure. So I do appreciate the chance to come teach for just a few weeks with y'all. I had a preacher when I was living in Little Rock who I remember was preaching Sunday mornings, teaching class Sunday mornings, and teaching class Wednesday nights. And I said to him, "Hey, that's a lot of teaching. Don't you get tired doing that?" He says, "Yeah, it is a lot of teaching, but if I'm teaching, it means I don't have to listen to anyone else teaching." And I've taken that to the extreme that I'll just go to other churches, apparently, and teach for them, so I don't have to hear other people. But again, I do really appreciate it. So, my dad said I could talk on anything with y'all, and I decided, as many of y'all know, I'm working on my PhD down at Baylor in theology and ethics, and I thought it would be fun to come and talk to a congregation on a Sunday morning about ethics. I have done a version of this class before that I called Crash Course in Ethics, but since this is even a fraction, it's a third of the size of what that class was, we had to reduce it. We're calling this one a tour of ethics. So we'll just do 4 weeks on the topic of ethics. So to define ethics, I hope it's not too much of the word doesn't seem too big or mysterious or anything. It's something that I think comes up somewhat in our daily lives, though we might be more familiar with the word morality. All of us use the word morality or to be moral. What's the moral choice? Probably a little bit more frequently than we use the word ethics. And some people would like to define those as two different things, but take it from me, they're basically the same thing. So when we're talking about ethics, we're talking about what's the moral choice, what's the right choice, what's the good choice. And ethics has to do with thinking about, reflecting on our behavior. Our behavior as people in the world, our behavior as Christians. So as Christians living in the world outside of these 4 walls, how do we know how to do the right thing? And how do we go about doing the right thing? So that's what we should be thinking about when we're thinking about ethics. Trying to live rightly, trying to live best in the world. So this morning, do we have? We do not have. Okay. I was going to use a whiteboard, and then I realized that is not a whiteboard. That is.
There is a whiteboard.
Yeah. Is there?
Yeah, there is.
Oh, look at that. Even better. Okay. And these look like permanent, but they're not. They're dry erase. Excellent. So, for the first 3 weeks of this class, we are going to talk about 3 big ways of talking about ethics. 3 ways that Christians have thought about ethics over the last 2,000 years. And these are two of the three ways are not words that we find in the Bible, but they are drawing on biblical themes. And so we'll survey those, and then in the fourth week of this class, if y'all allow me to keep coming back for 4 weeks, y'all may say, why don't you go ahead and stay in Waco? We will end our last week. I was going to actually leave it open to whatever y'all wanted to talk about, and I may still do that, so if y'all have thoughts over the next few weeks for a topic that y'all want to discuss, let me know. And we can maybe make that our topic for the fourth week. But currently, I'm thinking about, just because, why not keep it spicy, is talk about political theology or political ethics. And we won't really get into like partisan politics, Republicans versus Democrats, anything like that. But it's more about how Christians think about the relation between church and state. So I think will be a fun way to implement some of the stuff we talk about in the first 3 weeks. So, something to be keeping in mind while we talk about ethics is this relation between person, action, and results. And do I want to write something else? Sometimes this matters. Actor means, and get really close to the edge here. And these are words, whenever you've heard the phrase, the end justifies the means, that's a phrase that you've probably heard before. The ends justifies the means, that's what I'm using those words for. In fact, that's what we're going to spend most of today talking about, is this idea of the ends justifies the means. Okay, but before we get into any of that, I want to give you a choice that you'll make between two characters in the Bible. So, one of my personal favorite biblical figures is Daniel, who we've already referenced a few times this morning. And another favorite is Esther, Queen Esther. You probably noticed at some point that Daniel and Esther have somewhat similar circumstances. They are both these biblical figures that we encounter in the Bible who are that find themselves in exile in a foreign land. Daniel is Babylon and Persia, and Esther is a little bit later, just during the time of Persia. So they're Jewish people who find themselves in exile. And but you'll notice that they handle being in exile in slightly different ways. Daniel, most of his stories revolve around sort of separating himself from the world that he finds himself in. That's the very first story in Daniel chapter 1, is that they bring Daniel and his friends and all these other Babylonian wise men, and they're trying to prepare them to serve the king, and so they offer them the food, and Daniel says, me and my friends, we can't eat that food. It's unclean, it's unhealthy. We're going to eat vegetables, water. We're going to eat this food. And then there's a little competition. It turns out that they were right. So, but it's Daniel and his friends. They sort of separate themselves. Y'all are going to do that thing, and we don't want to do that thing. We're going to do this thing, which we know is right. We get the story of Daniel in the lion's den, kind of a similar story of Daniel saying, you've said that this is what we need to do. We need to pray. You can't pray to any god, but what is the actual edict? I'm trying to remember. Someone help me out. You can't worship your God. We know that's part of it. But then Daniel chooses, no, I know the right thing to do. Despite what the world around me is pressuring me to do, I'm going to do, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to pray to Yahweh. I'm going to pray to my God. And then he gets in trouble, thrown into the lion's den, but God saves him. So that's how Daniel approaches life in exile. He sticks to his principles. He knows this is the right thing to do, and he does it. But let's think about Esther. Esther, similar circumstance, also in exile. The dominant culture around her is something that's not Jewish. It doesn't follow the same God. And how does she approach it? It's a little bit different than how Daniel approaches it. In fact, if we're familiar with the story of Esther, there's a couple of things that's worth bringing out. One, she doesn't tell anyone that she is Jewish. She keeps her identity secret. And presumably, to keep her identity secret means that she has to live in a way that's maybe not as pious as how Daniel was living in his circumstance. Also, the story of Esther implies that, if you recall in the book of Esther, there's this competition where women are brought into the king to sleep with him every night who are not married to the king. And Esther, as a good Jewish girl, knows this is not what we do as faithful Jews, and yet Esther participates in this, mainly because she doesn't really have much of a say in the situation. It's the king of the most powerful country in the world saying this is what you're going to do. And so Esther makes a few choices that we may not want to make ourselves. We wouldn't want to live in that way. And yet, Esther, this is a book about Esther and how virtuous Esther is, and how Esther saves all of the Jewish people because of what she does. And so maybe if we think of Daniel as a very principled person who knows this is the right thing to do, and I'm always going to do that right thing, you might think of Esther as a more practical book, as a book that says, sometimes you find yourself in tricky situations, and you have two bad choices, and so you make the less bad choice. The lesser of two evils is what Esther has to choose between. Sometimes the phrase that you might hear me use is she's making the best of it. You're in a fallen world, in a sinful world. In her case, she's in Persia, and she's making the best of it. So, if we apply this to ourselves, we find that we are, in some ways, also in exile. We are Christians. We are sojourners. This world is not our home. We are very much in the same predicament as Daniel and as Esther. We are aliens in a foreign land. And so, I'm interested to hear from y'all. In fact, we're going to take a little bit of a vote. To hear from y'all, which way of life resonates with you more? The Daniel approach, the very principled approach, or the Esther approach, the little bit more practical way of living? Okay, so do we get the two options, Daniel versus Esther, as two different ways of living in exile? Getting some blank stares, but some nods. Okay. All right, we're going to do a vote. Your choice is, as someone who also lives in exile in a modern sense, we're all living as aliens in a foreign land, as Christians, which of these approaches resonates with you more? The Daniel approach, the principled approach, or Esther approach, the practical? Okay. If you want to vote for Daniel, it's not voting for me. I won't take it personally. If you want to vote for Daniel,
What we do or what we wish we did, or
you can interpret it however you want. We'll say this is what you do. How about that? This is how you think I, as a Christian, live in the world. If you want to vote for the Daniel approach, okay, got 3 strong hands and 1 timid hand in the back. All right. All right. If you want to vote for Esther, raise your hand. All right. Esther has the majority here. I'm going to say It's not like 8-ish. If I changed the question, if I said this is what you want to do, would y'all vote differently? If I say this is how you think you ought to live in the world, who would vote for Daniel then? Okay, so it seems to be that y'all think y'all live more like Esther, but you think Daniel, that's the better way to live. As a reminder, Esther is a book of the Bible. God very much seems to be in favor of both of these approaches. So I don't want you to feel like there's one way is the right way and one way is the wrong way. But for most of us, and I think this is pretty intuitive, in fact I have it in my notes, most of us feel like, oh no, there's something really special about how Daniel lives. And Esther's maybe makes too many compromises that we're not comfortable with. I want y'all, so we're going to sort of step away from Daniel and Esther for the rest of class. But I want this to be in the back of your mind for the rest of today and the rest of the next couple weeks, and then we're going to come back to it in our last week. And hopefully some of the stuff we talk about will help us think about Daniel versus Esther going forward. Okay, so just, let that percolate in the back of your brain. We'll step aside from it for a second. So, on your handout, thing at the top says Tour of Ethics, consequentialism. Consequentialism, it's a really big word, but we're going to spend the rest of our time today sort of unpacking what consequentialism is. Sorry, I saw some friends from high school yesterday that I hadn't seen in a while, and I'm already starting to lose my voice, and y'all get to deal with that. So, consequentialism, we're going to move backwards over the next few weeks. Consequentialism, out of these three things, is going to focus on this one. So, it's mostly concerned with results. So, I'm going to offer you a brief definition of consequentialism, but we'll unpack it some more. Consequentialism is results-focused. It believes that the consequences of one's conduct are the ultimate basis for judgment about the rightness or wrongness of that conduct. So if you're thinking, did someone behave, did someone conduct themselves in a good way or a bad way? What you need to, if you want to answer that question, you need to know what were the results of what they did. So if, this is a really sort of plain, basic, or almost silly example. If I take a step forward, okay. Generally, it's a pretty neutral thing to do. No one really cares if I take a step forward. But you might say it's a good thing if my step forward is taking me closer to something that I'm a doctor and I'm on my way to treat someone in the hospital. So my step forward took me a little bit closer to the operating room. So maybe that was a good thing. But if I take a step forward and turns out that my dad's foot was right there, and I just stepped on his toe on purpose, well now the consequence of that was I just stepped on someone's toe to be kind of a jerk, and so that was no longer a good thing. So it had nothing to do with the action. It was the same action, me taking a step forward, but the result was either I stepped on someone's toe or I was on my way to perform this operation. There are much more bigger and extreme examples of what this might look like, and I should have come with more off the top of my head. So one thing that, and we'll actually talk about this a little bit in a minute, probably the most common example when you're thinking about consequentialism is warfare. So we typically don't like the idea of killing people. That's not a thing that we get excited about. Generally think you shouldn't kill people. But sometimes we'll say, it's okay to kill people if it's during warfare, because we think that there's some greater good at the end of this. While generally I think it's a bad idea to shoot someone, if I think, oh, that's a Nazi that you're shooting who is going to go on and do worse things if you let them live, then in this situation, it's okay. It's morally acceptable. It's ethical to participate in that sort of violence. So that's how a consequentialist might think. What is the result? And again, the phrase that you might be thinking of is the ends, the results, justify the means. So killing someone, maybe not typically a great thing, the means, the action, but the ends, the result of we stopped Nazis from continuing the Holocaust or something like that. The ends justifies the means. Now, there's a lot of disagreement. I think this is on your handout. I'm going to kind of skip past this for the most part. A lot of disagreement about what sort of ends, what sort of results we're trying to achieve. What are the results that matter? A lot of different Christians over time have tried to suggest different things. A lot of people have said, well, basically, the main result we're trying to work toward is happiness or human flourishing. And that's what God wants for us, is God wants us to be happy. So how can we achieve the most happiness in the world? Some Christians have suggested, well, no, that's not the main goal. That's not the main result we're trying to achieve. It's just the most happiness for the most people. Some have said, we're just trying to avoid suffering. That's what happened in the fall, is that there's now suffering in the world. So the main result we're wanting to achieve is we're just trying to eliminate as much suffering as possible. But other people think, well, no, sometimes we improve by suffering. It teaches us something about our character, about living in the world. So there's a little disagreement about, okay, even if you are a consequentialist, and you say, yeah, the results, that's all that matters. What's the result of your action? Then it's still not clear, okay, what is our criteria for which results are good and which results are bad? Also, is it the results for me, or is it the results for everyone? So maybe I wanted to step on my dad's toe, and that was a good thing. I was like, yeah, he made me drive all the way up to Ennis for class, and maybe he deserved to have his toe stepped on. And so then, I liked that result. That was a good result. But most people, if you're a consequentialist, would say, no, because now there's more suffering in the world, namely my dad's poor toe. That's the other thing they have to include. Is the results for just me or the results for everyone? Okay. One last thing to throw out about that before we get into some more examples is consequentialism is very calculative. It's very much like the people who, this was really popular back in like the 1700s, and the Christians who really liked it were a lot of, I consider myself a fairly mathy person. I like numbers. That's who this appeals to the most. They want to be able to, okay, if I have on one side all of the bad things that happens if I do this action, I have on this side all the good things, and then I sort of weigh them out, and I can calculate this is the best course of action. Go ahead.
Well, couldn't you say that sometimes the action is overboard of what the result would be, like blowing up your house to kill a spider?
Yeah. Okay. So let's use this as an example. If you're a consequentialist and you think, all right, I want to kill this spider. That's what I want to do. I don't like this spider. It's going to bite someone, might make someone sick. I just don't want the spider here. That's the result that you want. There's a lot of different ways you can get to that result. And so one of those is to go step on the spider. Pretty small action for somewhat small result. You could blow up your entire house. That's for sure going to get rid of that spider. But then you think, what are all the other results of that action? I blew up the house and I got one good result. I got rid of the spider. But now I don't have a house anymore. And now the insurance company is going to come talk to me and say, are you trying not very well to commit insurance fraud? And I say, no, I just really wanted to get rid of the spider. So there's a lot of other results that are going to happen with that action. And that's part of being a consequentialist is you sort of have to calculate it all out. Yeah, I achieved one good result, but if I really add up on the docket, okay, here's a bunch of bad results that came from blowing up the house. Okay, this is probably not the action that I want to do. Other thoughts?
Okay, also, you get consequences from the consequences. Let's say, for instance, we're talking about, all right, you achieved by killing the spider. Both ways you achieved what your desire was to do. But one had no consequences. Now the other one has a whole bunch of different consequences.
Yeah.
So the consequences of you blowing up your house, I mean, it's like you have to weigh what, is there consequences of just stepping on the spider and killing it? What I'd say, maybe one, maybe you hurt your foot a little bit. Big deal. That's a small consequence that you have to take.
Or maybe now,
your house, and maybe you got a whole bunch of them. Now you got so there's a weighing of the consequences. You got to weigh what the amount of consequences you're going to get from this consequence against the consequences you're going to get from the other consequence.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think you do.
And then even the consequence that we kind of all agreed that we wanted to do, we want to step on the spider. Well, even that has consequences. Well, now there's a lot more flies in my house because there's less spiders to catch the flies. So y'all are already starting to get at why people were maybe not too thrilled with this way of thinking. It appeals to those in the crowd who like numbers and they maybe more of an accounting brain, like, all right, if I can just sort of measure out, here's the pros and cons of this approach, and the benefits weigh, so with blowing up the house, the cons weigh the benefits. But maybe you think like taxes, that to some extent, most of us think you should pay some taxes, though you may disagree on how much. And we think, yeah, I'm willing to give up a little bit of money because I think it'll make sure that my streets don't have potholes. Though, again, if you drive to my dad's house, you may say, I don't know where this is going. That there are some benefits, and I think those benefits outweigh the small price of me having to pay some taxes. But then, as y'all are already pointing out, it gets really complicated really fast. And you start to realize, life in the world, reality, is really complicated. So it's hard to just, if I just want to have my column of pros and cons and measure them out, and even weight them a little bit, it still gets really hard to do. We're going to come back to that. Y'all are jumping ahead. Yes, please.
Let's just praise God that He made our minds so able to weigh out consequences of consequences of consequences against consequences of consequences of consequences. I mean, just think how complex our mind is, and He gave us that free will, and He designed it just perfectly.
Yeah.
Prisons are full of people who didn't weigh the consequences.
Some people whose brains are operating maybe a little bit better than others. I do want to just kind of go through a few examples real quick about that may help you see. Try to do the devil's advocate for consequences. Why we might like this way of thinking. So oftentimes we will think, how much time do I have? 15 minutes. Sweet. Sometimes we think as consequentialists, when someone asks you, hey, does this shirt, does this outfit make me look good? Or does it make me look bad? And a lot of us might say, we'll just sort of intuitively think, yeah, you look great. Even if they don't really look great. And that would be a consequentialist way of thinking. Saying, okay, I don't like lying. I know that lying is wrong. But this is a really minor lie that's going to preserve their feelings. It's going to make them feel better about themselves. And the consequence of telling them the truth in this scenario has way worse consequences of, okay, now this person is very upset. They're going to go burn this shirt that they're wearing and never wear it again. So we sort of quickly weigh the consequences. If I tell them the truth, then a lot of bad things may happen from this. If I tell a very small lie, then no consequences will come from it, or no negative consequences will come from it. And so often many of us will say, yeah, in this scenario, telling the white lie is all right. I already mentioned like World War II is a really particular example. Dropping the atomic bomb is something that we've all wrestled with as a country for many years at this point. And yeah, are we coming up on in a couple years? It'll have been 80 years since we did that. And for most of us, when you're thinking about that, you get through it with consequentialist thinking. You say, dropping an atomic bomb on these two cities doesn't seem great, doesn't get me really pumped and excited, but the reasoning is, well, this saved more lives in the long run. So it's very calculative. You think, okay, on one side, there's the amount of people that will die from this, from dropping bombs. On this side is so many more people that will die if this war in the Pacific continues. Okay, so consequentialism. I have a few examples written down for myself, but I'm interested to hear from y'all. Can you see this way of thinking in the Bible? Can y'all think of any examples in Scripture that sort of use this way of thinking?
Peter denying Christ.
Peter denying Christ. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, he was afraid he was going to be persecuted, hung on the cross probably also alongside with Jesus if he confessed that he knew him.
Okay, this is really good. So Peter's doing the calculation in his head. If I keep identifying with this guy who's going to end up on the cross himself right now, then, or if I affirm this vision of being the Christ that Jesus is saying right now, that's going to wind up with him getting killed. It's going to wind up with me getting killed, all my friends getting killed. I don't like this. Jesus, you don't know what you're saying. And so Peter denies Christ. All right, what else?
One man dying, the consequences of one man dying
Okay.
for all of
Yeah.
history, past, present, and future.
So this would be a pretty big example of Jesus, the Son of God, saying, all right, I will take this small consequence because I think it's far outweighed with this really big consequence, which is dying on the cross, not fun. Saving all of humanity, that's a very good thing. And so, sort of, if you balance them out, or if you weigh them against each other, one thing, God, in Jesus' perspective at least, this is far more beneficial. What else?
We talking about liars a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
In Revelation, it tells us that all liars will go to hell.
Okay.
It doesn't say white liars or men. It doesn't say bad liars, but the white liars are good. It said all liars.
Okay. So, did you vote for Daniel earlier in our Daniel versus Esther? Yeah. So you're already pointing at like why we may not like this. But for the moment being, we'll take off our critical thinking hat, and we're putting on. All right, we all have to act like consequentialists for the next few minutes. What are some other examples in the Bible that we see of this?
Jesus being crucified, they wanted him to be shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They went all the way to killing him as opposed to putting him in jail or whatever else.
Yeah. So you're saying even from like the Roman perspective or the Jewish perspective, whichever one, this is the more efficient way of getting towards the result that we want, which is we don't want this guy spreading his gospel anymore, and so killing him, that's the best action to get to the result that we want. Other thoughts here?
Eve was hungry.
Oh, Eve. Yeah.
She thought that apple looked really good, and what bad could possibly happen?
Yeah, in fact, Genesis chapter 3, it tells us her moral reasoning about choosing, it looks good to the eye for eating, and that it'll give her the knowledge to make her like God, quoting from Satan, which is probably not your best source.
Yeah.
You'll realize when you're doing consequentialism, I think I spelled that wrong, but that's all right. That a really important thing is you have to have all of your data right. You have to have all the information and data to make the most informed decision. Eve had bad information making her decision. But yes, it tells us this is the result she wants. She wants something good to eat, and she wants knowledge, and so this is the choice that she makes, which ends up being a bad choice. What else?
Joseph, when he was sold into slavery, he even goes into detail of what you meant for bad or ill towards me. Actually, God worked it out for good, for not only me, but for you.
Yeah, I like this a lot. In fact, this is a recurring theme throughout Scripture of sort of the results that God will bring out of a situation. Because we can think of a lot of biblical stories as these events, these actions that don't look good, but then at the end we learn because of God's providence, they worked out for good. I like that a lot. Do you have another one?
Just saw Paul.
Kind of a similar thing. A lot of evil in his background, but then it works out for good. That's the result. Last example I had thought of was Samson. Samson, we forget sometimes that because, as a young boy, you hear about a guy who's essentially a superhero. Like, this guy is really cool. You forget that the book of Judges does not like Samson. He's not a good person. He does a lot of bad things. He's not a good Israelite. And yet, we appreciate Samson because he achieves a lot of good ends, a lot of good results. He kills 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. Now, Samson has himself a lot of bad actions, a lot of not very pious things that he does. But the results that he achieves, which is casting off the oppression of the Philistines, good result. So Samson himself sort of plays out this idea of not always the best actions, but very good results. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions?
Trusting a woman.
Say it again.
And he trusted the wrong woman.
And he
That was
trusted,
an action.
again, the wrong he had bad information. Delilah's,
He
maybe.
realized that, and he does her go back out and he regains strength and just goes.
Yeah.
Kill everybody inside.
All right. So,
Daniel,
yes.
I think we are all taught as Christians, and we would like to be like Daniel's position.
Mm-hmm.
But life enters into it. And things happen. And it makes us more like Esther because things happen that are very difficult for us to do, or maybe even almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
We end up being like Esther.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I think that's true. But the one way I want to push y'all a little bit over these next few weeks, if Daniel and Esther are in the background of our mind the whole time, is to not, because in many ways I agree that Daniel is the goal. That we want to be more like Daniel, though sometimes it plays out that we're more like Esther. And to some extent that's true. But I think that there's also a case to be made that Esther is the best case scenario for life in a fallen world. That we will never not be in a circumstance where we have to choose between two evils, and we have to choose the lesser of two evils. And so the way that Esther lives is a morally upright, is an ethical way of living. And if we can even be as good as Esther, then we've already done something well. And that really, our choice is not moving from Esther to Daniel. It's more of, sometimes we can act like Haman, or sometimes we can act like the Babylonian sages. And really, we want to move from that to Daniel or Esther. Go ahead.
Didn't she use that situation? I can't really remember the book, but and sort of ended up marrying him and became his favorite.
Esther?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so that's exactly what happens, is there's stuff in her life across the first few chapters of Esther where we think, I wouldn't want to do that myself. But then, obviously, good consequences come from it. She marries the king. That's the whole point of the book of Esther, and she saves the lives of all of the Jews in Persia by the actions that she had done before. In fact, I'm not meaning to connect her with consequentialism, but that should be the immediate connection that y'all make in your minds.
That example also shows God's providence. That's the reason why I think her whole life was the way it was, so that to save the Jews.
Yeah.
And God allowed her to be that way.
Yeah, God is very much active in the life of Esther, which, ironically, as y'all are aware, is the only book that doesn't mention God's name. And yet there's no doubt that God's providence permeates the entire book. All right, how much time?
5.
All right. You seem skeptical of that. A big chunk of my outline was pros and cons of consequentialism, which we've already done a lot of, so I don't feel bad if we don't get to that. But the one thing I did want to do with our last few minutes, raise your hand if you've ever heard of the trolley problem before. Okay, excellent. All right, we got one person who's heard of the trolley problem. Trolley problem is a lot of fun. It is an ethical exercise that was developed 50 years ago, maybe, perhaps trying to think between some of these ways of thinking. And we'll come back to it in later weeks. The trolley problem is this sort of mental scenario. You have a runaway trolley on some tracks. And ahead on the track is 5 people who've been tied up, and they're laid on the track by some sort of villain with a long mustache and a black top hat. They're tied up on the tracks, and you are standing right next to a lever that will reroute the trolley. And here are the poor people on the track. And you can reroute the trolley this way. First of all, let's just get a baseline. Who would pull the lever to reroute the trolley? Would you pull the lever? It's on a track. It's going to hit 5 people. You can pull the lever. It'll reroute.
How can we know the answer? What's the consequences to each direction?
Well, right now, the consequence of...
I know those people. I know the consequences there. They're dead. What?
We're going to...
Will the train continue on and everybody be safely delivered, or will the train derail and kill more people?
We'll say at the end of this marker's dead. At the end,
let's say you know what the consequence is, that it's going to derail.
So for this scenario, it'll just go around and there's no one there. Okay. So and you can for all intents and purposes, you can see what's going to happen. So who pulls the lever? You. Good. Hopefully all of you would pull the lever. That's clearly the right thing to do. If you wouldn't, see me after class. We need to talk. Slightly different scenario now. There is one person on the tracks over here. There's the 5 people on the tracks over here. Now, Charlie's going to hit these 5. You can pull the lever. It's going to hit one person. Who would pull the lever? All right, a little bit more hesitancy. Something is weird about pulling a lever. It's going to change the fate of things. But several of y'all did raise your hands. You'd rather one person than 5. Okay. So already you started maybe thinking like a consequentialist.
There's no emergency brake on this?
No emergency brakes. You have to make the choice. What if I tell you these are 5 convicted murderers, and this is a young surgeon at the beginning of their career with a bright future ahead of them?
Keep rolling.
Were they convicted?
Murder.
I know, but what's the consequences of the conviction other than being in prison? Is it life or is it death?
We don't know.
Okay.
All right, so Dr. Murders. Do you pull the lever? No, y'all let it go. Okay, wow. Okay, 5 doctors, 1 murderer. Do you pull the lever and it goes this way? Okay. Mostly no hands, but that's all right. For the people who did raise hands. Okay. So, we're going to come back to the trolley problem in later weeks because we can keep complicating this scenario, and we'll start to see some more of the difficulties of thinking about this. But from just a very basic version of it, it seems very consequentialistic. All right, we got 5 people on that side, we got 1 person on this side. I'd rather only 1 person die than let 5 people die. All right, to wrap up, their occupation may change things.
And this world has a mixture of people that think opposite.
Yeah, it's never as clear as we want to make it. So to wrap up, it is worth pointing out
And we have
that
to do it still today.
yes,
Government.
there's a lot of pros and cons to this way of thinking. We all have gotten at several of them. That it can be simple and clear. It's just kind of a numbers thing. It's very clear a lot of the time. It's also public, meaning you can, if we want to argue about is something ethical or not, we just have to say, here's the results of that action. And do you want those results or do you not want those results? So it's something that we can sort of talk about in a group very easily. There's nothing internal going on. But as you all have already pointed out, there's a lot of cons with this way of thinking. That a lot of the nuances of the situation are lost. Yeah, we said we want to step on the spider, but y'all didn't even think about the flies. There's a lot more nuances and complications. It also suggests that no action is wrong in principle. And we already brought up, well, some actions might always be wrong. It might always be wrong to lie, even if we like the consequences of it. And then sometimes there are unforeseen consequences, that we think we know all the results of what will happen, but sometimes we don't know. Okay, so hopefully I've left you in a totally confused state. You don't know the right answers, but that's my teaser. If you come back for the next 3 weeks, you'll get some of the answers. All right, thanks for letting me teach. See y'all in workshop.
Very good.
Worthy, O Lord, you're worthy, O Lord, you're worthy, worthy of every song we could ever sing. You're worthy, worthy of all the praise we could ever breathe. You're worthy, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. I still have